Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of our police podcast. We'll be talking about racial profiling, and our resident expert for the day will be Rebecca Rios.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca. Today we're going to talk about racial profiling. We've kind of been focusing on other police problems throughout this podcast, and I think to understand where most of these problems come from is understanding racial profiling and its history and definition. So to start off, racial profiling refers to discriminatory practices done by law enforcement officials, and these practices target individuals for suspicion of crime based on the individual's race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin. Although racial profiling can mean like anything. So for example, you can be Arabs, Muslims, and South Asians were kind of profiled after September 11th because of their connection to the World Trade Center. But we're going to be focusing more on the criminal profiling practiced by police today. So, for example, the police usually tend to stop more brown and Black people or people of color on like routine traffic stops. Have you guys ever heard of like the term driving while Black or driving while brown?
Driving while Black? No, I haven't.
I have.
Yeah, so it basically is a term that most of the people that are stopped on a routine like traffic stop are proportionately Black or brown. To give you the statistics, in like a report for 1 week, 79% of the total stops, like car stops, 79% were African American, and then the 2.7% were Latino. More than half were African American. And then for the next week, they were kind of reporting every week to see if there was a pattern. 44.5% were African American and 23.9% were Latino. Those were the two most races stopped for suspicion in routine car stops. So there is a proportionate difference in how many people are getting stopped based on their color. And I think that's something important to talk about. Where is this coming from? Are police told to target people of color? Is this being taught in the academy? Is this being taught in police stations? Where is this coming from?
I definitely feel like racial profiling is an issue when it comes to traffic stops. Especially because I'm not exactly sure how true this is or not, but I know in Fidel Castro's case, a lot of his traffic stops had to do with things such as expired license or driving without a license. I believe it was something that you wouldn't find until after you made the initial stop. And I think racial profiling, when you're already looking for a specific identity, I guess you can say, it definitely plays a role into unnecessary stops, pretty much.
Right. Would you say that like media has also played a role in like racial profiling?
I would definitely say yes, because you can just look at the TV and you'll see like car chases, or you'll see like cases where it's a person of color who's like driving recklessly, and there's even like showings of like drunk driving and stuff like that. And honestly, it's just watching so much of that just like seeps into your unconscious. And then I would say that I would even say that people say like, oh, you need to judge what type of car a person is driving, and if they don't look like they should be driving that type of car, you should pull them over.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can just see in broadcasting when someone white is like under suspicion or they're looking for them, it's usually a picture of them, you know, a graduate picture of them in their cap and gown or a picture of them and their family. And when a person of color is under suspicion or arrested, they show their is it called mug? The photo like that they take in
Mugshot?
prison? Mugshot. There we go. They show their mugshot instead of, you know, showing a picture of them as a regular citizen.
And if they don't have a mugshot, it's always like the most unflattering picture they could find off of their social media.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think that plays a big role, especially with like common people as well. It's just like you see those pictures that you don't get that like good feeling when you just like that first impression you meet someone. If the first one is bad, that's kind of how, you know, people will view you consistently until you actually get to know the person. And since you never are, then that's just how they're going to be to you.
Another thing I wanted to bring up was if you guys think that, I know we talked about kind of like the media being a factor in it. Do you guys believe in institutionalized racism?
Oh, yeah, I do, especially in prisons. I think it's modern day slavery for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also a big thing and why racial profiling has become so common in police systems because of the 13th Amendment. It's allowing for, you know, the new Jim Crow, the war on drugs, hard on crime, police brutality. It's allowing all these things and kind of perpetuating racial profiling that all the police people are kind of exuding.
Should we go over what the Second Amendment, or sorry, the 13th Amendment for whoever is listening doesn't know? I can read it out right now. Or do you have it?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So Section 1 is neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, which basically means slavery and involuntary servitude is illegal except if you are a criminal. So I think we also talked about the prison, right, just earlier.
Yeah.
They're taking advantage of this system of when someone's incriminated, now you can use them as basically slaves. But that's not how they're going to call it.
I don't remember what clothing company it is, but a lot of their clothing is made from inmates.
Oh, wow. Like, like former or like current?
No, it's current.
Wow.
Like they make it's like they go to work in the prison, like they're in prison and then they have like time that they're supposed to be like on the job and their job is like making these clothes.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm going to play the devil's advocate, and we could argue that what else would you do to actual criminals that are in like a jail? Are you just going to leave them like, I don't know how to describe it.
I think I get where you're going with this question, and I feel like more focus should be put on rehabilitation instead of punishment.
Right.
I was also going to say, even if you want to go that route and say that they should be doing something while in the prison, there shouldn't be a company profiting from their work without paying them. So if you're going to make them do things like build clothes or like make clothes and stuff like that, then if they're making clothes, these clothes should be given to like nonprofits and nonprofit companies,
charity
and like
organizations,
charity work, and like these clothes should be given out to like homeless people, not like to a company who's just gonna sell it.
Yeah, and if you're gonna exploit people, because at the end of the day, that's what they're pretty much doing. It's kind of unfair to use racial profiling to put a specific person into a jail system that's gonna work in your favor.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also kind of comes down to morals, and like of the company or of prison systems. I mean, in California here we have inmates that are firefighters, but they once they're released, they can't become firefighters. So they're just basically exploiting them for free labor. I know they do get paid, but they get paid like $3.
Wait, so they can't be firefighters after they get out?
Well, in California, I think California passed the bill earlier a couple months ago that they can, but before that they
Before was
couldn't.
wow.
Yeah, there was.
So they could be firefighters while they were in jail, but once they're out, they can't.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think they during the wildfire that sprung up from the gender reveal party, I think there were reports like saying that, oh yeah, because of COVID, there were less prisoners to help out the firefighters, so they were having like more trouble containing the fire. And then not only that, but they started dipping into the juvies, like the juvenile hall system, like and they were getting like 16 to 18-year-old boys to help with the fires because of the smaller amount of prisoners.
Wow.
All right. I do want to talk about the new Jim Crow. Do you guys know much about the new Jim Crow?
I don't.
Not really.
So the new Jim Crow is basically it comes out from like old Jim Crow. So old Jim Crow back then were laws of segregation for African Americans. They were kind of like, oh, you can't be in the same room as white people. You can't use the same restroom as white people, kind of taking away their basic rights. So this new Jim Crow kind of came about to undermine the civil rights, what the gains of the civil rights movements were. And this has to do with kind of like racial profiling because it, kind of goes with the 13th Amendment hand in hand that they're trying to profile African Americans in order to arrest them for longer crimes or to be branded as felons in order to deny them basic rights such as opportunities to become law-abiding citizens like voting or being able to rejoin society with a job or like even renting. It's hard for a past felon to rent a home. So kind of what the new Jim Crow's effect has been in racial profiling has been boosting stop and frisk, pretext stops, reasonable suspicion, random searches in police systems. So these are all kind of things that have allowed racial profiling to keep on being something. I know we talked about driving while Black, driving while brown. They are kind of institutionalizing this racism in police stations to target people of color. And we've kind of seen it to all of the deaths that have occurred, such as like Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, that have all been stopped for either like pretext stops, reasonable suspicion, or like stop and frisk and random searches.
Can you go over what those are like give an example, like reasonable suspicion, pretext stops?
Yeah, so reasonable suspicion, it can be anything. Like you can see if it's someone in a store and you kind of find them suspicious that they're stealing, you can stop them and, do stop and frisk, accuse them of something. And that usually is targeted towards people of color.
Yeah, I was going to ask who and what determine what reasonable suspicion even is. Is it normal behavior to someone? Is it suspicious behavior to another? I feel like that's something hard to ask of any employee. Everyone has their own.
It could be so vague. Like someone having a backpack, it could be seen differently Like, I remember one time I was at the store, and it was near my old community college. And I went in there after school, so I obviously had a backpack, and there was like an employee who was following me around the store because I had my backpack. And it was like, you're over here watching me when there's literally a girl like the next row over who's actually stealing something.
Hmm.
And it's like, just because I had a backpack, like, it's like I had a backpack because I was a student, but then it's like someone else could say, oh, wait, well, they have a backpack. Obviously, they're trying to steal something.
Yeah, I think reasonable suspicion kind of leaves room for police to be to make someone fit a description, basically. So they kind of find it within themselves to be like, oh, that person looks suspicious, I can arrest them.
Yeah, I don't know. And if you're gonna use reasonable suspicion, I feel like that's kind of like using a predetermined proxy to look for criminal activity, and that puts a lot of people of color at risk. Yeah, I don't know. Reasonable suspicion, that's a tough one. That's very open to interpretation.
Because you could also argue that the idea of reasonable suspicion itself isn't bad. It's the execution of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's like you want to prevent crimes from happening before it does. And, you know, if you do see someone that looks super shady, it's like, you know, you would want to do something about it before. But the problem I think we're talking about is how police are just
the abuse of power.
Yes, abusing this kind of like power that they have to target specific people.
I was also going to say that I remember reading an account from a man who was an officer. And he said that they're told that they need to hit like a certain quota, like a month of like people that they pull over and like tickets that they file and stuff like that. And he said that you just start pulling people over like because you need to meet the numbers. And then he said that where he used to work, that the person who like gave out the most tickets or like who did stuff like that the most, they would be like awarded for their behavior or like for getting like for giving out so many tickets and stuff. So he said that it even got to the point where the cops were like planting stuff on people. Like they would pull them over and say like, hey, I think you have something in your car. And then they'll demand that they get to search the car, and then they'll plant something in the car.
That's like management issues then, isn't it? That would be the management. I wouldn't, if it's that, I wouldn't blame the cop. Because it's like if you're working on like the sales floor for like a retail, right? They're always going to try to get you to hit a certain number of sales like per week or per day. So you're pushed to it. But then I don't know. I just looked it up, and it's pretty department based. Like some departments will choose to have like a quota for certain things, and other departments won't. But I think the idea of it is pretty. I don't like it.
Yeah, because then it just pushes them to do stuff like this.
Yeah, because then it's like, sorry.
No, you can continue.
Okay, because then it's like if they don't, reach that quota, they're gonna get some kind of punishment, or, they're not going to get that bonus that they may need or whatever. And it doesn't help, because then the people up top just want the numbers to show, hey, our cops are doing a good job, but that's not what's happening in reality.
Yeah, you definitely have to take out incentive.
The cop said that it eventually turned into like a game for him, and the people he was pulling over weren't even like people at that point. He said that he would see a person of color and be like, oh, I could pull that person over. And it wasn't even like, he said he didn't even see them as people at one point.
Right. Wouldn't it also be, if we're talking about racial profiling, okay, you know what? Screw that thought. I don't have it fully formed. I'll think about it.
No, yeah, but that's just like an example of how he used racial profiling to his advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would see a person of color, be like, they're a person of color, I can pull them over. And then he would abuse that power.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like if these police stations or like chiefs are telling them to pull over more people, they're gonna kind of go on who fits a, criminal profile. And that's kind of matching racial profiling. Like they're just picking who looks suspicious, who they can, file a charge on. Um,
Do we have any like suggested solutions to, I guess, any of the issues we've talked about so far?
mhm. Um, well, I personally am very like radical. I think that we can't change something that is institutionalized. It's
Mm.
institutionalized racism. I mean, racist police kind of stemmed from slavery patrol. That's, their origin in America.
Mm.
And I don't think that we can change a system that was built on that or that encourages racial profiling. I think that kind of dismantling what we have as policing in America now is the only way to kind of get rid of everything.
Mm.
I'm not saying like, we don't need police at all. I think the police that we have now and how laws are enforced and how police are taught and everything just needs to be dismantled and completely a new system.
Like a complete restructuring of the
Yeah.
entire system.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
What do you guys think?
I mean, I agree with that. The whole system needs to be reworked because of how ingrained a lot of this like institutionalized racism is. Like, I would even say like the 13th Amendment should be changed. Um, but if you want to say like if someone who doesn't agree that the whole system needs to be revamped and reworked, I would say like even just starting with like sensitivity training, or like not sensitivity but like trainings to combat like racial profiling and any sort of like profiling and unfair treatments need to be done now. Um, yeah, because it's like I remember this one police station came under fire because in their gun shooting range, they had like figures of people so that the police officers can like practice their aiming to shoot at the figures. And all of the figures had like random stock photos of men of color. And they came under fire because it's like you're subliminally training yourself to be more trigger happy when you see a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that needs to be completely like, that can't be a thing that is able to happen. Like that needs to be punished heavily. Even just starting with basic, like there needs to be tests to make sure that they aren't allowing in people with these racial biases, and trainings to get rid of racial biases need to be implemented. But it's just like it's so much work, and there's always so much pushback against the work that it feels like much more than it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of a mixture of what we talked about in the past. We'd like you said, we need a type of training or something from the ground up for like new police officers to understand like that they need to be as impartial as as possible, and they have to be held accountable not by the department, because the department's always going to be biased towards their own members. That's just how any community works, but by like another agency like that's completely independent of theirs. Hmm. As much as I want for a complete restructuring of the police force, I don't know if that can happen though. Like realistically.
Yeah, I agree. I like understand that it's more of a radical thought.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think it's that radical. I just think that it'll be so hard to do that it seems like
it's not worth the effort in a way, as bad as it sounds.
I think a different approach than trying to weed that out would need to be taken, because it's hard to account for it. It's hard to, I mean, we say that we will need to start from the ground up and restructure, but the thing is, it's hard. I mean, you're talking about hiring people who aren't biased, who don't act on their prejudices, on their stereotypes, but I mean, people can hide those going in through the hiring process, going in through an academy, but once on the field, they have the job already. They have the position of power. It's really hard to change something that is not readily seen in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's where being punished and held accountable comes in. But like starting from, like when you say starting from the ground up, it's like anybody who's becoming a police officer now would have to be like educated and trained on all of this new stuff, and then you'd have to weed out the older officers who are corrupt and who haven't been held accountable for like their past actions. And you need to separate the good ones from the bad ones, and then you need to like work on the system and the laws in the system, like no more of those loopholes we talked about in our last episode. And it's a lot of work to happen simultaneously.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it's easy for us to want all police to kind of learn how to stop racial profiling, to stop abusing others. We never know. Someone can completely lie, and then once they're in that power, they can show their true selves. However, I think that the system that they're going into already has so many loopholes and allows them to continue this. I mean, kind of the origin of policing in America was from slavery patrol. That's in the South. That's how police originated from. And then going from slave patrol to the new Jim Crow, to the new Jim Crow, to the war on drugs, to police brutality. Now it hasn't changed. It's been years and nothing has changed. That's why I think that this, even though we call for change and people say like new people of power go into the system to create change, nothing has changed. And for us to put faith in like, oh yeah, someone will come and the academy will change, other good people will change, we haven't seen that. So I think starting new with no loopholes, with correct training, with correct like a better application system to know that there's no prejudices or violent people involved in the policing system, something completely different than what we're doing now, because what we have now is not working.
In my opinion, I think that where it all begins to fall apart is their probationary period, because a new officer is usually partnered with a senior officer, and they already have their ways of doing things, and that's what they're shadowing, that's what they're teaching them, and that's what they pick up on, and that's why it continues. And yeah, like we talk about holding them accountable and training them differently, but it's gonna take a really, really long time if we see any change. Hopefully the day does come, but yeah, obviously everybody knows that racial profiling, it's been an ineffective police strategy that's been used, yet we still haven't been able to fix it. So to be able to see that happen, yeah, anytime soon, it's gonna be it's hard.
Ultimately, it stems from race, isn't it? How we view other races or ethnicities. And yeah, I don't know how
You
you
mean
would.
like stereotyping and stuff?
Yeah, stereotype. Like, because, if we just look at it from a broader perspective and not just police racial profiling, I'm sure regular people racially profile people. Just, when you're walking around, it's like there is some, like, I can't say to myself that I'm completely unbiased when I look at people. I know
Yeah.
I have, yeah, so like I can't say that. So I'm sure it's just I don't act on these because I'm more, I know better. But
I think that's what makes a difference between you and policing and even the healthcare system. Like, because I feel like there's a lot of racial profiling in the healthcare system as well. But that's what makes all the difference in the world, is when you act on those biases, on those prejudices, on those stereotypes. Once you begin to act upon them, they become discriminatory, they become racist, they become sexist, they become real once you start acting on them. And that's the problem that police have, is that they have the tendency to act on these thoughts that they have on other people.
Yeah, like throughout your whole life, you're always gonna have to combat stereotyping, and you're gonna have to always like make an effort to combat any like biases you have. And the problem comes when you don't correct those biases, or you don't work to avoid, like, when you don't work to avoid making actions on these biases or stereotypes, that's when the actual harm happens.
Yeah.
should we have like a race class be required, if that makes sense? Like like say in high school you have to have a class that's studies how studies race and how it affects kind of the society, and how we should be educating younger people on not to, or be aware of racial profiling, if that makes sense. My thoughts
Yeah,
are
I
not.
mean, I think having a class where everybody learns like the struggles of everyone else would be impactful. But then I also think even just correcting like history classes is pretty important, because a lot of the time, like even standard history courses, they're like watered down, and they leave out like a lot of the wrongs of um, the people who wrote the books, obviously. So
Right.
like I remember not learning about how the Native Americans were like murdered, and how there was practically a genocide until college. Like history books conveniently leave that out. They're just like, oh yeah, because of diseases, their numbers thinned. And it's like, it wasn't just diseases, it was people murdering them.
Mm-hmm.
So there shouldn't be any biases in history either.
Right.
Like even just taking away those things is pretty important.
Since we talked about how, kind of there's institutionalized racism in police systems, and police are taught to look for a specific person that fits the stereotype. Do you guys, sorry, not the stereotype, the criminal profile, more directed towards people of color. Do you guys think that police should not carry guns or weapons?
I think that's a tough one to take away their weapons. One, because they have an amendment that gives them the right to carry, and two, because, I mean, there are people that are violent, whatever race, ethnicity. There's going to come a time when they're going to need their weapons, and to not carry them also puts them in a risky situation.
Right.
I think it could, a solution could be, because I do agree there's always going to be situations where they do need like a weapon to keep themselves safe. But I think something else that could be done is, this is going to sound like kind of off because I just thought of it right now. But it's like they could keep their gun in a box in their car and the box would be locked, and depending on the call they can take out the gun beforehand. So it's like if they're called in as backup for like a highly dangerous situation, it's like, oh, okay, they open the locked box with their gun, and the box it has like it tells you every time it's opened and closed. And so it records every time the gun's taken out of the box, basically. And so it's like then it's like they only take the gun out if they need it, and then they make use of their like tasers and stuff instead for like calls that aren't dangerous in the first place, right? So like if they're called in for like something small and that situation escalates, they would have like their taser. They wouldn't automatically just be able to reach for their gun. But there's obviously faults in that because you can't always tell when something's going to be dangerous from the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I mean, a situation can escalate in a matter of seconds, and to have to go back to go get their gun, to retrieve their gun, I see where you're going with that, and I think it would just be hard to apply it to real life scenarios.
Yeah, logistically, that would be hard to make it work.
Yeah, so like it would be hard to make it work, but then it's like there has to be something like that, or like guns, the technology on the guns need to be like, I'm pretty sure a gun can keep count. If it's like a modified type of gun, it can keep count of like how many times it's used, how many times it's been shot. It's basically like adding a counter onto the gun. And so
maybe like going like with that idea, maybe adding something like that to their belt, so when they have to grab it from their holster, it would register every time they grab it or take it out, or
something like that, where they're less inclined to reach for it so easily.
What about, I know Taiwan does this, but to an extreme degree. There's punishments for using the gun, if that makes sense. I don't think we should do it here, but what they do is they're basically they're allowed to carry guns, but when they shoot, they are severely punished for it, even if it's well called for. So I think we should use something
on a smaller scale.
Like if you do shoot, you have there should be some kind of repercussion. Whether
you have to completely justify it.
Yeah, there has to be complete justification, and if not, you should be punished for it.
Yeah.
That way, police officers will be much more aware of like, hey, do I want to risk pulling my gun right now, and making the wrong decision? or am I just gonna go? I mean, obviously, even life and death situation, you're just gonna go, right? You're not gonna think about that. But if you have that thought in the back of your mind, like, hey, if I do pull out a gun for no like good reason,
Like, is this a situation I can use a gun or a taser?
right? Exactly. It's like if I could use a taser to and get away with it, that's something that I can do instead of just, hey, I'm gonna pull my gun right away and just get what I want. Yeah, the thing with Taiwan is it's pretty bad. Like if a criminal has a gun and a cop has a gun, if the cop shoots and kills a criminal, the cop is imprisoned. So we're not doing that. But I think something to a lesser extent would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that, sometimes cops do need guns in situations to protect themselves. However, not all first responders need guns. Like, do we really need an armed first responder that is sent to address, for example, like Eric Garner, who was selling cigarettes on the corner? Did he need a gun? It could have prevented the loss of his life. It was a simple call, just to either arrest or, tell him he can't sell them there.
Yeah.
Did he really need a gun for that call?
I think it's safe to say, like, that we all agree that he didn't need a gun. It's just like I said earlier, it's hard. I try to put myself in a situation like of a police officer arriving to a call. You don't know what somebody has on them, be it a knife, a gun, or any type of weapon. You don't know what you're going into. So I would rather have something that I can also defend myself with, as opposed to just going in not prepared and not going in with the intention of using it. And obviously I know it's just, you can argue it both ways. It's hard because whatever way you try to argue it, it's one life or another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like you obviously want everyone to be safe, but cops don't just have their guns on them. They have pepper spray, they have batons, they have tasers, but they jump to the gun too quickly.
Right. It should be seen as a last resort.
It's like you go to the call not expecting anything, and it's like, okay, you show up and it's like everything's calm at first, and then the guy pulls a knife on you. You could pepper spray him. Like, you don't have to shoot him.
Would you guys say that happens because the gun is so close to their other weapons of choice? For example, their pepper spray, or
I think the gun's on the opposite side. So the gun's on their right hand, and the stuff like that's on their left side, isn't it?
It's not even an easy mistake for them to make, correct?
Yeah, it's not. It's I guess you could argue, depending on what hand they like, with their dominant hand, it's easier.
Yeah.
So if you're right-handed and your gun is on your right side, you're gonna reach for your gun faster. Like, you could say that. So then it should be switched. Like, your gun should be on your left side if you're right-handed.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that they don't have to jump to the gun, and it's like going to 0 to 100, and it's like, okay, if the guy's at a 50, you should be at a 50. You shouldn't go to 100.
I think that stems from either inexperience or just straight panic, because I feel like a lot of the officers aren't really trained to deal with super high stress situations. I mean, no one really is, but I do jujitsu, so I'm gonna use that as an example. It's a grappling art where you kind of like try to choke each other out when you're training. So like when you're training, you're basically gonna be choked out, and it's a kind of when you first start, you're scared, you're panicking, and you kind of go over the top with everything you do. But as you continue training under that stress, controlled stress, you start to relax, and you know that like, hey, things will be okay. So if we can do more training with like high stress simulation training, then the officers won't go from 0 to 100 right away. They'll be like 0 to 50, and then they still have the mental capacity to like properly evaluate the situation. Like, do I need my gun right now? No, I don't. Okay, I'm going to choose something else. Because most people are like, okay, something bad is happening, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to pull my gun because it makes me feel safe, which I understand. It's like it makes them feel safe, but once you have the gun, then it's like you're so much more likely to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, where it comes down to.
And I think that their threshold, like for pulling out the gun, for killing in the first place, is a lot lower. They're trained to, in I guess, right away go from 0 to 100. And I think that lowers their threshold to actually using their gun, when instead that they should be trained to remain calm in situations like that and use the gun as a last resort.
Yeah, like de-escalation tactics should be very important, because I think I talked about it last time. They spend less time on de-escalation than firearms training, which doesn't make any sense to me, because de-escalation, I would say, is more difficult because there's more varied situations. And, yeah, firearms, you can always practice that on your free time. You don't have to take a class for that. So.
And then, like, considering what you said earlier about fear, and then taking it back earlier to the conversation about reasonable suspicion, it's pretty hard, because I think as a citizen or someone that's part of the public community, being deceptive and nervous, it already makes you look bad. And yeah, you can kind of see, like, I mean, from somebody being nervous, just acting nervous, to an officer, that can already make them suspicious of them, and it can it could raise red flags when it's just normal human behavior. So if they're scared of someone being or acting normal how they normally would in a situation like that, it kind of, I don't feel like something like that should warrant the use of a gun when somebody's just reacting to a situation.
Yeah, so you're saying it's like the police officer, one, is already suspicious of someone, right? So their stress would be a little bit higher. And then the person who's under this random suspicion is going to be nervous because it's a cop and they're nervous in general. And then the cop would react to their nervousness, and then it just spells chaos.
Yeah.
And so that's it. I think it all really does tie together, and it all boils down to training. Training needs to be improved on multiple levels.